Hi folks, welcome to the Ask the Arb podcast. So today I'm super excited because we've got another interview format podcast, and I know a lot of you get sick to death of listening to me prattle on about all the problems in the world. So today I am delighted to have Gonzalo, who is the CEO at Renkap, join me on the podcast. Now, I'll let you do your own research and obviously we'll have a good chat about it. But Renkap, essentially, if you haven't heard about it, it's a platform that kind of simplifies and centralizes site investigation and site survey effort into one portal. So, I mean, have I murdered that, Gonzalo?
No, that was pretty good. Essentially, it's making it easy for the property professional that needs to appoint surveys to make it super easy for them to upload a site and instantly be able to access the best suppliers across the UK and get prices back, manage the process and collate reports and be able to know what they need to do on the next stage. So simplifying that process for them.
And I suspect I know the answer to this, but what led you to create this platform? Was it born out of frustration? I mean, take us right back to kind of the early days in your career, and let's see where you started and how you've got to where you are now.
Yeah, sure. Looking back, it looks like a really long journey, but I worked at a large property consultancy previously, called Arcadis, and I was a cost consultant. So essentially that's quantity surveyor, but working consultancy side for the client. And I worked on very large residential schemes. So kind of 600 units to 1,000 units, so 250 million, 300 million plus, and managing contractors and all that sort of stuff, high level. One of the things that I used to be involved with quite a lot was in design team meetings. So this is on different projects where the whole design team, so the client, the architect, the engineers, the cost consultants, the project managers would all the planning consultants would all meet together maybe once a week during the early stages of the planning process to refine a scheme, make sure that it's on budget, make sure that we're getting the value that we need, and make sure that we're getting all the information done in order to get a successful scheme at the end of it. One thing that I saw crop up several times was abortive costs.
Yes.
So what I mean by that is doing work and then having to redo it because something got figured out later that should have been figured out early on. And this is usually related to surveys. So you might have realized that actually there's a tunnel underneath the site, which we never realized about, or the red line boundary was wrong, which we should have figured out at the early stages, or there's some sort of problem with the access, or there's some trees that's got an issue that we need to design around. And the client would have spent hundreds of thousands sometimes on that design team, getting the design to maybe a stage 2, stage 3, realizing, okay, we need to kind of change this and go back and we redesign, recost it up, new cost plan, new program, and the whole kind of scheme needed to kind of change. And that's where my brain started thinking a little bit about how frustrating it was that we weren't getting that information properly at the beginning. So yeah, my beginning was as a consultant for Arcadis on these big projects.
And it's that problem that you've identified there. I think it's one that everybody can relate to, certainly from a consultancy and professional perspective and a design team perspective. And it's a totally scalable problem as well. So you're talking about one end, many units, multiple £1 million developments, but that's just as relevant for somebody who's putting an extension on the back of their property as well, because they get sold the dream. The architect comes round, sits down with them, has a cup of tea, does a little sketch, sends them some beautiful plans, everything gets signed off they go to planning, and then they discover that they need all of these surveys, or even worse, it gets to the point where stakeholders start to look at it within the planning validation process and then realise that actually, I don't know, they need a BAT survey, and there's a huge timeline on that, which then throws everything out.
They might be out of season, they need to wait 9 months. The whole project's delayed, they got a huge hole in their wall. Like that's all the problems that come out of this. And what we did essentially is create a platform that supports the client, whoever they may be. And what was something interesting that we realized about surveys, I don't know if you've seen this, Matt, yourself with kind of your clients, is it's so fragmented who actually instructs surveys.
Oh, yes.
So sometimes it's the client directly, sometimes it's their architect, sometimes it's the planner, sometimes it's a consultant, a developer, a local authority, a housing association. Like, it's always different places. So we're starting to get clients from pretty much the whole spectrum of the property sector. We're working with clients directly and consultants, individual house builders, and it's helping them figure out what steps, what things need to be done at the right point in time in order to mitigate those abortive costs later on. Absolutely. And we've kind of put that into one system.
Yeah, I mean, just everybody talks about online and digital marketing and productizing things these days. And one of the key building blocks of that is to really niche down on who your ideal customer is and who your ideal client is. And you've just hit on the sort of elephant in the room within our own business. Actually, it's like, who is our customer? Because as you say, quite often the architect will come to you, and that's great. You can build a relationship with the architect, or even better, a planning consultant. Build a relationship with them, and you'll get lots of referrals moving forwards. Sometimes the end customer will come to us because they're frustrated with the architect, or the architect has recommended somebody that doesn't actually know particularly much about what they're talking about, or it might be the location of the site. It's a different area to one they're used to working in, so they're not familiar with the local planning authority or local planning policy, etc. So yeah, that's a very astute observation there. Absolutely.
Yeah, that ICP, the ideal customer profile, is in this sector where it's quite fragmented, is quite difficult to understand, and then different clients also behave slightly differently. So for example, an architect practice, some of them may support clients to do these surveys at the early stages. Others will say no because they've been burnt in the past and they've had issues, and there's liability problems for them if they recommend that supplier. Most of the time they won't give three options. They'll just give the one that they know. So they'll say, use that supplier over there. If there's a problem later, they've got liability problems for themselves, and some of them have been burnt in the past, so they try not to do that, manage the surveys anymore.
I can think of a few situations we've had where that's worked, and it's worked the other way as well. So there's one particularly well-known planning consultancy in central London that we do a lot of work with, and they recommended us to their client to carry out a suite of ecological surveys, some of which were preliminary bat roost assessments and then bat activity surveys as well. And we completed the work. There was a bit of a problem midway through it in that the team couldn't get access in the middle of the night. And the end client ultimately turned around and said, well, we're not paying our bill. And then that sours the relationship with everybody. So I think having a platform that everything can flow through is a really, really good idea. So tell us, you've told us a little bit about the background there and the idea behind Renkap, but how was it born? How did it come? Because this is not an easy thing to get any kind of platform online off the ground. That development journey, just from a technical perspective, must have been a bit of a challenge, was it?
Yeah, definitely. And just to go back on my background, so at Arcadis, I was really into kind of the prop tech scene back in like 2015 when it was kind of starting to get bigger and bigger. And part of my role at Arcadis was actually to start looking into kind of prop tech opportunities, and that was something I was really, really interested in at the time. And at the same time, I was actually I was working in the affordable housing sector, so I had a very big view and experience in the affordable housing sector and the kind of issues within the housing sector that caused the housing crisis that we have today. And one of the key things I wanted to do was I wanted to see how could we help public sector mainly unlock all this underutilized land that they've got, because they've got loads of brownfield small sites that could be delivering 1 million homes plus. And how can we help them unlock more sites and bring them forward to the market? That was kind of one of the first things in my mind. And when I started exploring their sites and speaking to them and testing it out, this proposition, I realized from them that a lot of them didn't even have the time and resources to be able to figure out which sites are suitable and which sites have risks or which sites are possible for development. So that's kind of where it all first started. Then the proposition was, okay, how can we help them to de-risk their sites without them having to put so much management time into a project? So for example, when a client comes to yourself, Matt, and also need loads of our surveys, so they might need topo, utilities, ecology, legals, planning, whatever they need. There's loads of surveys that are part of that process, and they need to put lots and lots of resources into actually figuring out what survey they need, managing all those surveys, getting the quotes, instructing suppliers, managing suppliers, getting a design team. So really, there's a big commitment for them to put in order to even review a site. But they've got hundreds and thousands of sites. But the government, how it works at the moment is they're being told by government, deliver more homes with less funding. So what that means is they're focusing on their very large sites. But really, the majority of sites, which is what we used to be building in this country back in like the 70s, 80s, are the ones that now house builders are not interested in them. SMEs are way less than they used to be. So there isn't that many SMEs delivering these sites. And the private and the public sector is focusing on their largest sites because that's what the private sector wants. They don't want to work with you on a small site. They want to work with you on a huge site where you're delivering 500,000 homes. So the aim was to help them unlock their sites and be able to bring them to the market. We put that proposition forward. I put a business case for what the kind of Renkap is right now. And I got into an accelerator program. So it was a government-backed startup accelerator program specifically for prop tech. And it's called Geovation, which is really, really good.
Right.
And it's ran by, there's one in Scotland as well. So they've got an office in London, an office in Scotland. And it's run by the Ordnance Survey and Land Registry. And that gave us kind of a place to work from, loads of support, a small tech team to support us to build our first MVP. And we did that. We built the first MVP. I went full time, so I left Arcadis, which was a bit scary at the time. And then pandemic started like 3 months later.
Oh, no.
And then went into that, built the MVP. We started to get a few customers, demonstrated traction that there's a market for this. And then that helped get the investors. And then investors helped to build more of the product. More of the product helped to build more clients, more investment, more. And then I call it kind of that's the triangle of I use a bad word for it, but it's the triangle of something, which is when you build a product, which basically is you need the product to get the clients.
Yes.
You need the clients to get the investors. You need the investors to build the product. So it's how do you break into the triangle?
Yeah, I feel your pain on that one.
Yeah. And for us, it was we built the product with an initial MVP.
Yeah.
That helped us get the first clients that were brave enough to test it out, which then got the first brave investors. And then it just kind of grew from that. But that's where it all started from. And funny story about myself is we realized that me and my partner, wife now, but we realized that we'd never be able to kind of get on the property ladder in London. It was just impossible. So even though we were both earning good money, so we were just like, we just can't save enough through renting. So we both actually went to the bank, took the maximum personal loan out we could, which I think was like 25 grand each at like 19% interest. And we bought ourselves a boat and we lived in a boat in London for 4 years.
Fantastic.
So that was kind of our way to break into the housing market. And I don't know how it kind of worked. And we lived in a boat, in a canal boat on Regent's Canal for 4 years, saved up, and then bought our first flat.
Well, that is very much in London, isn't it? The Regent's Canal. Because you won't. I did actually know that story, and I was going to ask you about it later on when I was doing my research. And it's funny because my family used to own the Basingstoke Canal in Hampshire and Surrey.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like 100 years ago. And my father was the waterways manager of that canal. So all through my childhood, I spent a lot of time working with trees and diggers and doing fun things on the canal.
Amazing.
And they had the local authority had predetermined or preset areas for houseboats for that very reason. Yeah, I mean, you sort of touched on it there, but even that's not a cheap place to live, is it? With mooring fees, etc., as well. So it can get quite challenging.
Yeah. Well, funny, for the first 2 years we were continuously cruising.
Oh, well, you got round it up, yeah.
Yeah, which basically means you need to move every 2 weeks, and you're not plugged in, so no electricity, no nothing like that, just a generator. So that was a bit intense. But then the second two years, we were in Brentford, West London.
Right.
So we were there, which was nice, and then somehow sold it and saved up some money, and then bought this.
Awesome.
But yeah, that was part of the reason for kind of starting Renkap as well, was to figuring out how frustrated I was about the housing crisis and seeing if we could help unlock more land for more homes and bring more sites to the market.
Yeah, so this is the proper tech end entrepreneur story, this, isn't it? So before long, you're going to be on How I Built This with Guy Raz, and
I love that podcast.
I know, it's brilliant, isn't it? So I will have warmed you up for that. So
you should do your own.
That's it. I'll message him later. So where do you see? Obviously, we've got a little bit of experience of the platform, and we really like it. You know, we've offered our services through that platform a few times now, and it works really well. But where do you see it going? So what's your kind of next 5 years look like?
Yeah, so for the time being, what we want to do is we want to essentially be able to provide that initial connection to the consultants through our platform. And it's a way, what we've seen, which is really nice, is sometimes the initial connection that we make with a client, the consultant with a client that they might have never worked with before. And we've got some really cool clients now, like Cambridge City Council, Greater London Authority, AHR Architects, Bailey Garner, developers, contractors. So connecting with these really big companies. And the cool thing that we're seeing is after they connect and do the initial survey on our platform, they might be asked to actually support the design team further later on. So there's actually, we're kind of given that initial intro service where then the client gets an experience of using that supplier, and we'll ask them to do more work on that scheme to take it through the planning stages. Where we're seeing that we want to go is we want to be kind of the go-to site investigation platform, and we want to make that its own category. At the moment, it doesn't exist. The only way to do site investigation surveys at the moment as a client is you need to either do it yourself, manually call all these suppliers and get comparable quotes, instruct them, manage the works, get the reports back, get zip files, WeTransfers getting sent to you, read all these reports and try and figure out what's going on the site as a whole. Or use a consultancy, which is quite expensive, or potentially use kind of a framework to find suppliers. All of those processes, that takes the client about 4 weeks of management time. Either if it's consultancy or the client, 4 weeks of management time. With us on our platform, because we connect vetted suppliers with great clients and make the process super simple for the client side, the whole process of managing all the surveys and getting back all the reports in a digestible format for the client takes 1 hour. So it used to take 4 weeks. Now it takes them 1 hour because they upload a site on our platform. It takes 10 minutes. They then, the prices then come back from all the suppliers. They then review their tender report, which compares all the prices and all the kind of the quality, and they can see all the suppliers and they can see people they've worked with before, and they can select who they want. That takes them 20 minutes to just look through that tender report, select what suppliers they want. They click a button and immediately it's instructed all the suppliers. And something that you just mentioned a moment ago was the risk about getting your money for the works you're doing.
Yes.
When they instruct that work, they need to pay. So they pay up front. So if it's 20 grand's worth of surveys, they have to pay 20 grand worth of surveys. That gets put into the Renkap kind of client account. We then distribute that to our suppliers as soon as the project's delivered. Yeah. But the client can't progress without paying for that money. So we're very strict on making sure that the funding is there to be able to pay our suppliers on time every time.
That's absolutely our model as well. Unless we've worked with somebody for either a number of years or multiple projects, in which case we'll accept a purchase order. Whether you are putting a conservatory on the back of your house, or you're putting in 100 houses or more, it's payment up front. And that's based on 12 years of experience of getting our fingers burnt. So I think that's absolute genius on your part to come up with that, and that's definitely going to attract more suppliers and more consultancies into your platform. So yeah, no, that's great stuff. And what sort of challenges have you discovered up to this point? Has everything that you've stumbled across been, have you seen it coming, or has there been things that have made you kind of take a step back and think, we didn't envisage that one?
Yeah, there's been loads of learning, and I think one of the hardest things that we've done is creating any business is hard. Creating a tech business where you need tech expertise and developers are expensive, and then also creating a marketplace, which is what we are. So we've essentially got two clients, I would say. Really, we've got our suppliers are our users, and our clients are our users, and we need to make sure that the platform is valuable to everyone that's on the platform. That's quite challenging, and we focus a lot on the client side and making sure it's faster and better and a lot easier for them to be able to transact through the platform. And now we're focusing on making it way better for our partners and suppliers. And I think one of the key learnings that we learned quite soon, which we're now implementing to the platform, we've got a new version that's just about to go live, is that suppliers, at first we were working with public sector, so we were trying to make it very public sector compliant. You get 3 prices, don't see who the suppliers are, see only the prices to start with, and then they can see the suppliers later, and in a stage format as kind of RICS best practice. But what we've realized now is we're getting loads of private sector clients, and they just really want to see who the suppliers are. And then also the suppliers really want to show who they are, because they've all got great experience and history and projects they've done previously. So now what we've done is we've completely changed the platform to show, as soon as you upload the site and you get the prices, you can see who all the suppliers are, a bio for each supplier, their kind of background, what they're all about, the cost that's come in, but it's much more of a holistic procurement process rather than pricing being kind of one of the key elements. Now it's actually who they are, what they've done before, projects they've done on the Renkap platform, plus price is kind of the review, and the client can then select who they want. So that's something that we've learned to make it a lot better for our suppliers, so they can demonstrate who they are and ideally win more projects.
That very much appeals to us, because I suspect probably if you were to go back through your email history, and possibly your colleague as well, that there's several emails from me saying, well, we don't compete on price, and we don't. We never have done. We will never be the cheapest on your platform or any of the platforms that we're involved with. So that will be a welcome addition, I think, as we move forwards and build a relationship with you guys. So that's
cool.
It's been really, really interesting to get you on here. It's very, very different to what we normally have. But this, I tell you, listeners, this will revolutionise the pain that you don't even know you're about to feel by getting all your site surveys and all your site investigation, all your survey effort through one single point of contact is absolutely genius. So thanks a lot, Gonzalo, for coming on. How can people find Renkap, and how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, so best way to find us is on our website. So www.renkap.com. That's RENKAP. Otherwise, there's a contact page there. Otherwise, get in touch with me on LinkedIn. Always happy to connect. And on our website, you can request a demo. We can show you how the platform works in a little bit more detail, and there's lots of videos and stuff. But yeah, happy to discuss with anyone.
No, that's great. Thanks a lot for that. I'll make sure I put a link to all of those resources and a link to Gonzalo's LinkedIn in the podcast notes, so check that out. Thanks a lot for listening, everybody. Thank you, Gonzalo, for being on the podcast today. And we'll get you back on in another 5 years and see if you've taken over the world yet. So that's
thanks for the invite.
No problems. Thanks a lot. Cheers.